Hello, 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 everybody.
Hello, and welcome to OvalEdge Live. I am Joanna, and this is Kayla. And today we're going to be talking about building a business glossary. So first things first, we're sitting here with some coffee. I've got my blonde roast with some steamed oat milk.
All right, and as Joanna said, I'm Kayla, and I'm that crazy person, iced coffee all year round. I've got my vanilla sweet cream cold brew. And as you guys can probably see by now, we had an unexpected change in the lineup. So instead of Teresa, today we have our big boss CEO, Sharad Varshni. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Sharad.
Hey, thank you. Welcome everyone, and I'm here to talk about business glossary. Sharad here, and I am drinking Starbucks latte.
Nice.
Lovely.
How about you?
Oh, hey guys, Rachel
Different,
here, and I'm joining you from my home office, currently drinking out of my Ron Swanson mug, and it's just a Starbucks Pike Place.
Nice.
Lovely.
Well, it's great to have you guys here with us today.
Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead, let us know where you guys are tuning in from. And if you have any questions, we'll be marking those to circle back to at the end. So with that, Joanna's going to kick us off.
Okay, awesome. So first up, we just wanted to kind of start with the basics and ask both you, Rachel, and Sharad. So what would you say is a business glossary, and why did we choose that topic here for our OvalEdge Live?
I think that's a great question, and I always like to think about this logically, where the name says business glossary, meaning it's for the business. I think oftentimes there's some confusion in the industry that it's the same thing as a data dictionary, and it's wildly different. While there's some similarities, it's the purpose of it. It's really different, right? So it's for the business. And when we think about what is inside of it, it's that business knowledge, right? Encapsulated to help try to increase just literacy about the words that we say. Are we meaning the same things? It's that place for those standardized terms and definitions meant to help aid the business, regardless of where you're at or who you are in the business, is what I would say.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Anything to add, Sharad?
I think Rachel said it perfectly. It's a place where all the standard definitions are there, and the main component of the business glossary is what we have seen is that although the many times organizations do have business glossary, but they exist in a spreadsheet somewhere. Nobody knows about it. So the main component comes down to the process of building it and process of basically putting it to everybody's fingertip all the time. Those are the challenges I think we should discuss we were discussing in this blog, I would say.
Okay. Wow, great. Thanks for that response, guys. So with that being said, that was the why of, why do we need a business glossary? In your opinion and with your expertise, how would you say next is how do you build a business glossary? What does that process look like in your experience?
Sure. I think I want to touch a little bit more on the why, which will affect the how. I think why this is a good place to start. The idea of a business glossary, I think one of the main use cases of a business glossary and the value it can add is that it can increase data literacy, right? And when I say data literacy, just like language, you learn to understand new words. And when you come across something you don't know, there's this need for learning, right? So that we can communicate clearly. When you hear people saying things you don't understand, you're not as active of a member in that process. And there's just more chance for confusion, right? So I think why data literacy in the business glossary is a great place to start is that it's going to affect everything else that data is involved in or that business process is involved in, right? You have to understand. Sorry, I'm losing my voice all of a sudden.
All good.
You have to understand the words that you're saying so that when I'm talking about the quality of our data or how your data moves throughout your ecosystem, and when you're talking about who has access to data, you first need to understand what those things are. When I say or reference a certain data point, we need to have the same understanding of what that is. And that could be encapsulated through a business glossary. So I don't know, Sharad, if you want to add anything to that, but I think that it's a crucial place to start.
Yes. Also, just to understand with little bit with examples, like suppose you have a customer lifetime value, right? So until unless say, hey, the customer lifetime value will say a customer have say $700, but what is the lifetime value really mean by say a retail company or something might have $700,000 whatever, but it need to define the lifetime is defined as a 5-year, 10-year, 2-year, 10-year. Let's say you said, okay, this we define 10-year. Then you acquire another company and say, oh, the company only exists in 3 years time frame. Then the lifetime value of the customer will be way less than the company which existed earlier. So those are the challenges, I would say, even to understanding of it, the definition need to be exact. Otherwise, the company A lifetime value versus company B lifetime value, you cannot compare. If you cannot compare, there's no point of data which you are looking at it. So that why you need a business glossary, to have a very crystal clear understanding of the KPIs. And one thing I would like to add into that is certain KPI and metrics are very standardized, like which is governed. Like for example, if we talk about EBITDA, if we talk about total revenue, it comes from the financial regulations. Nobody can exact formulas, definition, accounting principles. Everything is defined in that. But if you go to the marketing, if you go to various areas where the regulations are not there, these things are not defined properly, then if the new marketing manager comes from a company A and their click-through ratio is how they interpret it, they move to company B and their click-through ratio definition might be different. So they might be making a millions of dollars in judgment about a different kind of metrics which they come from the company A. And people move around all the time, different companies. So that's why it's very important to understand the definitions of it, because you are making a millions of dollar decisions on those data points, which sometimes you may have a misunderstanding of that. So that's I was just the examples to understand that.
I totally agree with Sharad. Like that's something I've seen at every place I've worked and every client that we interact with at OvalEdge. It's kind of funny. People come to us and I think they think it's their business problem that they're miscommunicating wildly, but it's really just a life problem across every company I've ever worked with at this point. You run into this idea of we need to make a decision and we weren't able to make that decision because of, and it's always a data literacy problem, right? Places I worked in the past, and one of my favorite examples to think of is I was a BI analyst at the time, and I was supposed to be able to create a report showing how much we had to sell, how much volume of a certain commodity did we have to sell, and then, check the market rates for those things, and then advise our team, our account executives on how much do you have to sell this quarter, right? But that idea of position to sell was wildly different depending on what report I was looking at or what data source I was going to, or just the understanding of people in departments. This was a sales and finance joint effort. Finance was defining position as just what was in physical inventory. Sales was defining it as physical inventory plus whatever's on contract and what they're forecasting to think what we could sell based on the last, however many months. But that wasn't clear anywhere. That wasn't defined anywhere. And so, head of sales made a decision and we lost millions of dollars because we made a decision based on a metric that they thought they were understanding, but they weren't because it was not well defined or well communicated. So I think that's going to be a very common experience when it comes to, thinking, okay, finally, I need a business glossary. It's usually those types of scenarios of I can't make an effective or wise business decision because I don't know how to make the decision because there's inconsistency in the information that I'm being fed through analytics or reporting. I think those are some of the main problem points that we come across most often.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I definitely have seen that with some of our clients that we've been working with lately. So definitely acknowledging those pain points and moving from there. Yeah.
Right. And you see the need to build a business glossary, but then you have to figure out how exactly are you going to go about that. As far as my understanding is, there's actually a couple of different ways that it can branch out for you to build. So maybe we can go into a couple of those.
Okay, yeah. And I was going to mention too, before we got into that, if you guys have anybody watching, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and we will touch upon them at the end of this session here. So just to be mindful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. We love participation. I always hate when I give demos. So my role here at OvalEdge is I do pre-sales, and giving a demo to a stale audience, you're like, are you guys tracking? So please.
Are you here?
Yeah. Anybody
Let
there?
us know you're here.
We can ramble on all day, but yeah, the participation is always appreciated. But
yeah.
Kayla, I think you bring up a good point. So we've kind of coined two terms here at OvalEdge when we're, evaluating where clients are and where they're coming from, and that there's two main approaches to building this business glossary. The first we've called top down, and the second bottom up. And I'll talk about top down first because I think that's really easy and yet really rare. We don't see clients often being in this position. And that position is that, there's no existing terms and they don't have this strong push or need for a business glossary by the result of a problem. There's not existing confusion about, business terms that are already being misused, right? It's more so things are great. This is a corporate strategy that we could move from good to better. And so they create a, data governance group that involves top management, executives, and they decide these are the important terms that we want to start socializing and standardizing and getting out there and communicating. And hopefully this will improve business process. But it wasn't necessarily we experienced a loss or we've identified this big problem or we are having confusion. It's just, we want these things to be more known because it's important to us as top management executives, right? So top-down approach. Top decision makers are choosing what's in there. They establish a committee and then they push them out to the business and socialize them and try and then gain adoption from their organization for what they view as important. Very rarely do we see that happen, I think.
Yeah.
Where the other method is bottom up, where we see that, I would say, Sherrod, almost above 90% of the time, right? Where there's different departments. You have information sectioned in silos all throughout your business. And within these different departments, there's different terminology that carry different definitions, and yet they're often meaning the exact same thing. And so then when we're trying to communicate across silos or throughout the organization, there's, a lot of the pain points Sherrod and I talked about at the beginning. There's this miscommunication and there's this lack of literacy and inability to make decisions or incur fines or a loss of just more productive decisions because you're making a fine decision, but not the best decision you could make based off this data. So in this bottom-up approach, we see that the same first step is there. You decide to create a data governance committee, and then this committee's tasked with trying to create these standardized terms. But because it's not a top-down initiative, they're not just picking what those terms are because it's important to that group. They're going to go out into the business and analyze what should we focus on. And that analysis is often done by making sure you have access to key stakeholders that are both in data-driven positions as well as business positions, business process positions, by leveraging and analyzing reporting. And they start to try and figure out what are those critical terms, and then how do we get them into the glossary to then socialize. So the goal isn't just socializing key terminology and definitions like in a top-down approach because it's important to them. We want to do that, but we want the business buy-in so that we can learn where's our business struggling, where's our business needing more literacy to then be able to push it out. And so that's what I think we see
makes a lot of sense.
Most often. Sherrod, want to add any color to that or disagree with me?
I think I would just add some examples to those things. I think a lot of people can understand as they are moving the data points across. say for example, like if a lot of people are developers, right? They move the ticket from, oh, I'm done with it, I've resolved it. No, after that I've moved resolved. Some people use done. Some people use different status, right? So resolved means, is it moved to QA, or does it means it only went to the development is completed? It's a confusion there. Even when you are creating the data, there is a confusion, right? So once you are creating the data point, there is a confusion, and then the development team or that specific team know what resolve really means. Only that team knows, not the downstream, the executives, everybody do not know that. So once they move to those areas, right? And then after that, suppose you want to create a report from it, and then executive want to see, okay, how much progress we are making. And say, okay, how much is in QA, how much is in development? They want to see at the high level, and sometimes the QA work is also showing in the under development because they do not know what the right definitions are, right? So the people who are creating the reporting structure, they do not know what the development really meant by those standard, the statuses, and that basically start the confusion there. And after that, this confusion goes on downstream because the people who create the report are not the business users who are actually using the data point. And those all the way downstream happens across the board. I still remember that when I was in nuclear power industry, and it's a complex industry, so they used to have something called failure codes, the why certain things failed, and their definition have to travel across the board and have to be consistent, pure consistent. Because if the failure code definition is not right, you cannot analyze your maintenance processes. And if you cannot analyze the maintenance processes, then you cannot do any analysis of that, and then downstream. And again, those are nuclear power plants. They need to have the very defined processes to do this. But most of the time, when this kind of literacy is not there across the organization, those standard terms and statuses and the KPIs and the matrices, what we are calculating, those formulas are not consistently defined. It creates the problem, right? So those are some examples of that. I will take a little bit like the top-down approach. Top-down approach is very good when we have exactly like when we say that we have these are the failure codes and these are the definitions, and these are the definitions but decided by some sort of a committee somewhere. And it is a very standard business practices across the company, right? Those works really well, like failure code in nuclear example, right? The financial industry, they uses those terms. They just need to make sure that everybody can get to that data. So those are defined and mostly they are available. So the top-down approach only happens, as she said, right, like 5 to 10% of the time where the processes are actually governed. But the bottoms-up approach is needed because most of the time, organization at the lower, not I would say lower level, but at the bottom level of the organization, they're already making a decision. They're already doing certain projects. And that is where they're doing the project. They're already familiar with the terminologies and they're using statuses. While on the other team are using different, they mean resolved, while the other team means done. They all make the same thing, but they need to translate resolved to done, right? And then this is all this transformation is happening. And when the downstream, when you're creating those reporting structure, that is where they started going, a little bit haywire, kind of like the statuses and the terms and the literacy.
Right.
That is why the bottoms-up approach is needed to make the I would say that connection between different teams, because there are teams, one team, second team, third team, and you need to have a representative from every team. Because as soon as you will not have representation from one team, then you cannot include their concerns and you cannot articulate well while building it. You will not be able to successfully implementing it. So that's why it's important to have everybody on board while building the business glossary terms. So it's more of like a process to follow it. And so the analysis work is very important, because if you have 5,000 people organization, which 22 use this, that is the analysis work. Otherwise, you can pick a wrong people. And after that, if you pick the wrong people, you once you build it, there will be no problem. Once you implement it, there will be no problem. But when they make the decision and the wrong decision, that is the problem with company will lose.
Right. And I feel
so you will never know that money has been lost.
Right. And I feel like I've seen that, Sharad, like a place that I used to work at, as we were trying to enable our culture to be more driven from like a self-service model where the ability to create reports and drive analytics wasn't just within a BI team, as we were trying to extend that out to other people. I think we saw this like increase of data literacy problems because then there was new reports existing in the data stacks, right? Where one example I think of was something as simple as, what is our retention rate? I was working with an HR department for a while, and the retention rate of employees, how many people did we keep? How many people did we lose? That turnover rate. It was important to know because that metric allowed us to be a part of certain associations for our business, right? This is the best and brightest place to work. This is a great place to work. And because we had a new analyst creating reports showing retention rate, they weren't calculating it the right way because they were showing anyone that had passed away, unfortunately, or people who retired as part of that churn rate. But those things, per the business, and the head of HR said, those things don't affect retention rate or turnover rate. That's just life. That happens. That's not a negative reflection on the company's retention of employees. But so there were reports out there because the analyst that wrote that report didn't know that wasn't part of the data set that they should consider, right? And so there's just this idea of, if you don't know the business process well enough and you don't know the data well enough, and yet you're in a position to use data, you can just push, kind of garbage data out there. Then you have to make decisions off of it, or other people are blindly making decisions off of it. And it's things like the head of HR needing to notice that doesn't match my gut feeling of how I know things to be. And so we're trying to reduce that process of being able to encapsulate it in this, bottom-up approach. What are these examples? How do we drive forward literacy in light of these examples, right? What are those important terms that we need to make sure we socialize so that people can use data well? And we're trying to use data well because we want to do well by our business, right? We want to make good business decisions. And I think that's the heart of this, is we want to make people's lives easier, right? In addition to analytics, we want you to have some governance on top of it so that you're able to feel empowered just to do your job better and make it simpler for you to do that, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that all requires like a place to start. So identifying where your organization is coming from, what you can do based on your maturity. And I was wondering if we could maybe transition into, we've talked like little bits and pieces about the components that are in a business glossary. So maybe we could just go ahead and just lay them all out side by side.
Yeah.
Sure.
Some practical components.
Sure. So a business glossary is full of terminology, right? And those terms can be metrics, they can be KPIs, they can be standard terms like Sharad was saying in the financial industry. We all know what gross margin is. We all know, right? There's these key things. You want to encapsulate those. Great. But when it gets to be more that metric KPI level, you want to be able to really define, this is what it is. And you can infuse those definitions with a lot of valuable information. It just doesn't need to be sentences describing, like if you were to open a dictionary and see, sunset means this when the sun goes down, right? It's more than that. We can say at our system level, here's this reusable code. This is what this actually is. This is where it comes from. You can infuse a business glossary term with that. So when people are going to create additional information, they have what that standard is from the technology level, right? We can go ahead and add in certain privacy or compliance standard to that terminology, and then say, the data that applies to this, let's go ahead and protect it or classify it. So business glossary terms, it's not just a stale, dictionary that you could pick up and then read about. It's something that's meant to be used to, drive forward initiatives to protect and classify information, to enhance your ability to do good analytics and make better business decisions. So outside of just a term and a definition, you can have classifications on there. You can have privacy rules assigned to it. You can have that reusable code assigned to it. I think it's also important to see, when was this term created? So there's going to be that idea that business is always changing, and terminologies might be able to change to show how current a piece of information is going to be a part of your business glossary. When was this last reviewed? When was this added? And that's going to be something important to keep up to date. So, am I making decisions off of current standards, or is this existing from 10 years ago? I think a final thing that I would say is really important is also when you have a business glossary term and it's linked to that data, it's identifying where this data is across all of your systems. You're going to run into the experience that you have the same data existing, same or similar data existing in multiple different tools, right? And being able to identify, this is my authoritative source. This is the data point that is our master record. All other data that's similar or the same has to adhere to this standard. And an example for that is that, I think of one example from a past life was that I had to work as an analyst in a company where I had to send out Christmas cards to people. And I thought that'd be very simple. Go to my CRM, which was Salesforce at the time, download all the customer addresses and the name of the customer and send it to them. I offended a lot of people by doing that because I was sending cards to people who were no longer our clients, people that had passed away, old addresses, competitor addresses, because there was some garbage data in there that people had listed some of our competitors as our clients. And I thought it was this simple thing as an entry-level analyst. I could just send cards to the people listed as a client, as a customer. Great. And then my boss was wildly upset because it was like, you sent one duplicate cards to many addresses, people who've died, people that are our competitors. It was awkward and horrible. And I had no idea that I'd made a mistake, right? And so where that problem could have been solved with the business glossary is that we not only had a CRM, we also had an ERP, and the information that I thought I was using the Salesforce information. This report actually tied back to the ERP information, which was more of our financial set, where that's showing just like things that are coming in, business that's flowing through, and it wasn't the actual customer address. It was historic information, not current client information that was housed in the CRM. But I didn't know that's how that report was built, and so I just went off what I knew, right?
Right.
And so I think a business glossary is important because I could have gone in there to see client address or customer address, master record, Salesforce, and then I could have been like, all right, that's the data set I'm going to use to, build and send a report. So it's things like that you want to try and notice so that, you can drive better literacy. But
yeah, that's good stuff. Anything to add, Sharad, to that, or?
I think she have added almost quite a bit points to that. And, the example she took it, sending the addresses, sending the cards to different people. Each card cost $5 at least, to send.
Right.
I'm just telling the money involved, right? I remember that. So I have registered myself with Dell, Dell web company. They always send me 3 flyer. Always 3 flyer comes from Dell all the time. And I said, like, they need our product probably, or they need something. It's like always you get 3 flyer. And like there are $3 wasted on me, and they have probably 100 million customers. Multiplied by 3 is $900 million.
Yeah.
If that mistake is there, but if not is there, at least 10% is there. It's $90 million. So the money, just the bad data have a lot of money significance to it. And it does not cost a lot to implement the better business practices. It's important to do it because the decisions she took it, she realized, I'm an entry-level analyst, I just have to send the card. But there is a financial implication was there. One of the financial implications, just the sending the wrong card, but that's not that bad. Another one is offending the customers, and that becomes a much more bigger problem. So business sometimes think that they are taking action is not that relevant or sometimes, but even the entry-level analyst makes decisions, which is quite complex, important for business. And that's where the sometimes the decision making, the data, this is not that important. every decision business makes is highly important. And that's something I
Yeah.
want to put it in a term to just give you that example that how the things comes with the millions of dollars.
Right. And you
That's
can,
yeah.
you can see some people trying to solve that problem of, the problem at the time was entry level analyst made a bad decision. Some people would try and fix that problem by saying, let's just reduce access. And we're going to more lock down our, method of analytics. And it's this standardized team, but then that's not productive for the business, right? Because then it's putting more strain on IT, most likely. They have a long backlist of projects that they're never going to get to. And so the business is handicapped at needing to only make decisions with the current tools in their toolbox, which is they're really wildly technical, people, or just people who have been with that organization for a long time, so they understand all that tribal knowledge. So the auto correction of solving a problem isn't to reduce access. While that would have prevented my problem, it's not, a forward thinking solution. You want to be able to empower that entry level analyst so they come in and they know how to make decisions based off the data that they are fed, and they can have, tools in their toolbox to be able to evaluate and discern, is this good information, rather than just saying this report's out there and I think it's right, so I'm going to use it, or I think this data set's right. I guess I'll write a report from this and hope for the best, right? So governance kind of can help them, onboard quicker, get to know the business quicker, get to know what things mean at that organization quicker, so that they can be more effective sooner, so that even onboarding time of new employees could be reduced, because we're speeding up the process of having them become literate for how that organization does business, if the business glossary exists and they can go to refer to it and learn.
Good stuff, guys.
Add to that point quite a bit. It's a very common human behavior. As soon as things goes wrong, to remove that person or access to that person, this is what people do all the time. And I have seen that many times that, hey, the governance is about managing, how much openness you have, how much restrictions you create. It's always, people have seen that access management as it's a part of the governance. That's why they talk it. And that's one of the reason, if you ask a better, like more holistic data governance experts, they will always say that, the literacy is a key component of the governance as well. And that's bring down that the governance is not about just managing the access, giving this information to that person or not, but it also literate them. Because if you can literate them, then you can have better equipment. You can better equip them with that information, what you're providing to them. So it's highly important to bring that, the governance, why the business glossary is a part of the governance, and why the access management is a part of the governance, and why the data quality is a part of governance. That's the key component of it, so that you can have the data available to everyone, but with the right information, with the right access, with the right quality of the data. That's the key component, which is drawing into this conversation.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks, guys. That's a lot of information, a lot to chew on, and we want to keep rolling. So this is the next question we've got here. And regarding the business glossary, we've talked a lot about our need for one, the benefits of it, anchoring your program, and that idea, or the process of starting with important terms. With those terms, one question that we've been asked many times is, how do we identify and then prioritize our terms? What have you found is helpful with that process?
Right. So I think that's going to tie back to what approach you're taking, right? That top down or bottom up. If it's a bottom up approach, I think leveraging and doing appropriate analysis of the information that's out there, trying to identify what terms are most used, what are most critical to our, necessary business decisions, or if the company's going through a certain initiative, maybe let's focus on the terms that are helping drive those decisions. Just trying to identify and prioritize critical terms based on either corporate readiness, like whatever project is most high on the corporate priority list, or things that are just used consistently across many different reports. So you could do simple analysis to see, okay, all of our Tableau reports out there, this term shows up 300 times across this many reports. That's our most popular metric, a lot of visibility to that. Let's make sure that we're communicating that on that correctly. So I'd say one of those things, what is a high chance of miscommunication based on availability of that term throughout the organization? The second would just be, if I'm moving towards a goal, right? Companies often will set quarterly or yearly goals for themselves. I would take a look at, what is important to us that we get right to be able to make these goals achievable. So I would start with looking at those terms that are critical to, business initiatives that are going on. That's where I would start. Sharad, anything to add to that?
I think those are the point mostly used, and we use in our OvalEdge product as well. Like we created something called popularity score and importance score. The idea is that, once you're coming up, something may be really popular, something may be highly important, we see it integrated, and something is popular means used around the places. So you can you can either do analysis or basically crawl all your data sources and see, where the importance score is higher for, and basically use those as a priority step, as an item to start considering those first ones. But again, there's when you will get a laundry list, you need to still compile it and still formulate that. Okay, there is a lot of information coming, because most of the organization do not have a perfect naming standards. And that's why if you look at the spreadsheet which you downloaded or some information, you will see the same term is appearing multiple times. So you need to kind of consolidate those terms, because of the naming convention is not perfect. So you need to consolidate those manually or use some AI to kind of consolidate those. And then once you get consolidated, that's probably one of the best way. Of course, you need a committee and governance people to kind of collaborate on that. Okay, we want to work upon this one. But that's another one, is sometimes the hybrid approach is good when you have a top down and bottoms up. Basically, that's where the progressive approach, what we have tried to develop, and which we help through the academy as well, is looking at the bottoms up. Basically you can do the analysis, you will come to the sheet, and then you can take this to the governance committee and say, hey, these are the things coming up. Do you want to put an emphasis on certain point? And the executives are pretty know that what they are looking at. Okay, yeah, I know that these are the points which we really look at the day-to-day basis. Let's focus on these areas. So you can take 100 terms and you will get a 20 priority item very quickly if you take those to your executive. But if you ask them, give us 20 terms, which is priority, you will probably get the wrong answer from your executives committee, because they, on the top of the head, they cannot remember it. And if you want them to give your work, it's not going to happen. So that's where you need to do the analysis first and then present it to the committee. Then committee can very easily prioritize it.
Right. And I think an important thing to notice is when Sharad and I are talking about who's doing this work, that's going to change based on top down or bottom up approach, right? And that bottom up approach, the people that are doing that work is that committee, and that committee, leverages the business to be able to make those decisions. And so that component could be, if you're not, running queries against systems to see usage on certain reports, if you're not doing it in a technical approach, because like Sharad said, naming conventions are going to be inconsistent. It'll be hard to find that information. Leveraging things like surveys that you send out to those key stakeholders in the business to see what's important to them and, what are they having problems with, and reaching out to the business, consolidating that kind of manual effort as well of what's the feedback we're getting from these important stakeholders. That could infuse the process of, how do we get the correct things in? How do we focus on what we should be focusing on? Where, like Sharad said, it's not just going to be as simple as let's see this keyword because it'll be called different. Different places. So doing things like surveys and asking a lot of questions and doing that requirements gathering will most often be, something that is helpful, like Sharad said, leveraging AI technologies, but then also maybe there's going to be a more human component and approach of sending a survey to key stakeholders to get their feedback back as well to help drive decisions.
Yes, and we do actually have created a document to help with that.
Okay.
So let me just pull it up real quick.
Wonderful.
And let's see. Alrighty, if everybody can see that. We have it on our Business Glossary blog post on our website. And essentially what you can do is you can just go ahead and click the picture and you'll be able to download a survey that we've created that we think will take a broader approach to asking how you're going to prioritize and define your most important terms that you can send to either your key stakeholders or anybody who you feel is relevant to ask. And so the main goal is that if you just ask people very vague questions, you're going to get very vague answers or even just forward answers. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to prompt those longer conversations and get those started for you guys.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, I know we want to, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, whenever I see things like this, it's just, I can imagine it will be helpful. And,
definitely.
Where I joined OvalEdge as an analyst, I wish I had these types of things. It would have.
It's hard to come up with questions, definitely.
Asking me like question is hard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it helps to have some pointed ideas for you.
Yes.
I know we've got a couple minutes here left, and I know we wanted to ask some questions. I want to see if there's anything else that we need to tie in here before we do that. Mm-hmm. Kayla, you got any?
Probably just maybe touch a little bit on socialization. So like once you've prioritized your terms, you've defined them using either the top down or the bottom up approach, just the what comes immediately after.
Right. So I think that's a great question, and one that your business decision makers are going to want to know, right? What's the ROI of doing this? And how do we show what that is? I think first, to socialize, having things like consistent touch points with those key decision makers is going to be important. So whether it's just an agenda point on a standing meeting, or if you have the ability to create a meeting that focuses on managing the backlog of initiatives that you're wanting to do, or terms you're wanting to create, or projects you're wanting to focus on. I think it's just important to create intentional space to continue having these conversations and have them consistently, right? It doesn't need to be a weekly meeting because we're all so busy. I know that throwing just another hour block on a calendar isn't always a possibility, but having something like a 45-minute touch base bi-weekly to continue reevaluating priorities, and then looking at the problems that we identified that involved certain terms. Have we seen those problems be, improved? Are people able to be more self-sufficient in making decisions and building reports? What's our volume of creation look like? Or what's our IT requests for help? Have those decreased for this topic? There's going to be multiple ways to try and figure out, is what we're doing effective? And then talk about that in a consistent way, right? Just have something on the books, be sure to talk about it, whether that's an email that goes out or a meeting or a survey. You could approach that in multiple different ways, but I think communication is key, right? This is all about literacy, understanding each other. So just create space to have those conversations consistently. Awesome. I think is the most important thing.
Lovely. That's great. Thanks, Rachel. To kind of close out, because we've got a minute here left, we might end up needing to just do a part 2 on this because we've got a lot of great questions from you guys. But one last question is, do you have any advice that we can give of what not to do when setting up a business glossary? Anything that you're like, do not do this, please.
Right. Waterfall effect. Don't try to do everything all at once, right? We don't try to approach that with any measure of governance, right? When you try to do everything all at once, I think you'll fail. So think about what is key and critical right now for something, right? Whatever that is that you're trying to solve for, start there. And then when you're ready to move on, move on. I would say it's overwhelming to try and fix everything all at once.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Anything you've got, Sharad?
I will take it one thing only. So I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah,
That do
it's a
not
good
start with
takeaway.
because I have seen so many data lake projects fail because they try to do everything at once. Similar to a lot of data governance project fails because they just do everything at once, and then they I need a 20 people team, 30 people team, and that budget is never going to be approved. From the practical point of view, because they can't show any ROI. So that is
Yeah.
why it's important to have a limited team. Not go to the team size super big, super ambitious, but still have progressive approach. Start with something and then move on. So you have a consistent approach of that. That's the way of success for anything in the life, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
You start a big bang. If you want to start a big bang, you have to be really, really experienced into that area.
Right.
Which most I don't think that anybody's have that.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Well, we really appreciate you guys joining us, answering a bunch of these questions, getting into some of the meat of building a business glossary. It's been insightful and helpful, and hopefully it's been helpful to you guys all watching. Anything you want to add, Kayla, as we close out here?
Well, if we haven't addressed your question, we do have a place where you can check out some more resources that we've built out, and that is with our OvalEdge Academy. So it's very easy to go to, just academy.ovaledge.com, and we go completely through like a 5-part series of how you build a business glossary.
Yeah, awesome. Well, more to come, you guys. Thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This was fun. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Fun.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll finish our coffee offline.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.